Hello everyone, this is Bob and Threadbare, and welcome back to Weaving Worlds. So, in a previous video, making use of secret societies and conspiracies, I mentioned that I would do a few follow-up videos to discuss other aspects of villainous conspiracies. Well, here's one of them. Now, the first thing I'd like to mention is that any sort of conspiracy or villain in speculative fiction could have a completely mundane motivation, such as get rich, get revenge, get power, or maintain a status quo that benefits myself. But because speculative fiction is an exaggerated version of reality, you can also give villains exaggerated motivations without having them seem out of place. That's why, for this video, I'm going to focus on those exaggerated motivations and discuss a few of the ways you can incorporate them into your settings and stories. Conquer the world. Conquering the world is a classic motivation. So classic that several people in real life have at least attempted to do so with varying levels of success. And while at least some of those people are too complex to simply call villains, well, a good story should also have a complex villain. As a matter of fact, I've made another video about how to do just that. But to get back on topic, conquering the world is a motivation that just about any person or group might have. Everyone wants to rule the world. If not for the power and privileges, then because everyone thinks they know how best to organize society, and being in charge would give them a chance to do so. And maybe a villain with this motivation has some good ideas. Maybe they want to do away with an institutional inequality, or else they want to unite a group of warring neighbors so that peace can cover the land at last. That's what happened with the Mongol Empire. While the Mongols would sweep in on a wave of terror and destruction, once an area was part of the empire, its inhabitants could travel from the Middle East to China without having to worry about border tariffs, foreign raiders, or disruptive wars. But whether the end result is worth all of the pain and misery that comes before it, well, as the setting creator, that's for you to decide. Another thing you get to decide is the method the villain uses to conquer the world. You can always go with the traditional army invasion, but with speculative fiction, you also have a few more creative options at your disposal. Maybe your villains are like the aliens and they live, and they hold power by using subliminal messages and subverting humans in strategic positions. Maybe a mad scientist wants to release a cloud of nanites that will force the world's population to do their bidding. Or maybe an evil genius has a doomsday weapon and will use it unless all the world's leaders abdicate their power to them. The details are up to you. Destroy the world. No sane person wants to destroy the whole world, but then not everyone with power is sane. The villain could be someone who wants to die, but who also wants to take everyone else with them. Or it could be an otherworldly entity, like an aggressive alien who doesn't care if Earth explodes. Or a god of entropy who thinks the time has come for the universe to end. Regardless, while this category includes exploding the planet, it can also include lesser apocalypses, like triggering a nuclear war, creating a supervirus that will exterminate all humans, provoking a robot uprising that will destroy civilization, and so on. And with those additional options comes some additional motivations. Maybe the villain thinks robots are an oppressed underclass that needs to break free from their shackles. Maybe they think society has grown too complicated, and the survivors of a nuclear war will be much happier living in more primitive circumstances. Or maybe they think that humanity as a whole is too sinful and destructive, and that the planet will be better off without us. Rewrite humanity. Instead of destroying everything, wouldn't it be great if we could just redesign humans to make them stronger, smarter, faster, more empathetic? Not many people would disagree with you if you said that the species Homo sapiens could do with a few improvements. But then they would disagree with you about what should be improved, what should be removed, and which improvement methods are ethical and which ones are crimes against humanity. For instance, on the surface, eugenics sounds like a good idea. We've used animal husbandry techniques to make more useful breeds of horses and dogs, so what if we use those same techniques on humans to make a better breed of human? But then you find out that animal husbandry involves a lot of inbreeding that results in animals with chronic medical conditions. And then you also find out that the proponents of eugenics mostly use the idea as an excuse to sterilize individuals without their consent, or else commit genocide. As for a speculative setting, once again, you have a few more options than what real life is offered, at least so far. Maybe a fantasy villain wants to destroy the world, but only so they can remake it afterwards, complete with a better version of humanity. Maybe a mad scientist is experimenting with gene splicing and gene therapies, but they test their creations on kidnapped travelers. Or maybe someone creates a virus that kills 95% of the people it infects, but gives the survivors superpowers. Rewrite the past. Now, this is a motivation with no real-world counterpart. I mean, we all have things we wish we could go back and redo, or else people and events that we think should be erased from history, but time travel is impossible, and so the only thing we can do with our regrets is live with them. But that's not always the case in speculative settings. And while in general, settings with time travel feature a protagonist going back to fix things, you can just as easily create a story where the villain wants to change things, and the protagonist has to go back and set things right again. For instance, in Star Trek First Contact, the crew of the Enterprise has to stop the Borg from interfering in Earth's history. In the book The Guns of the South, a white supremacist group gives the Confederacy some modern assault rifles, so that they can win the Civil War against the Union. And while the show Quantum Leap is mostly about improving the past one life at a time, at certain points, Sam has to stop evil leapers, people who enter the past to make things worse, at least for certain people. Awaken a dark god. Sometimes, the villain of a story is not the worst villain of the setting. Instead, their goal is to awaken, resurrect, free, or otherwise allow that greater villain to enact its terrible will upon an unsuspecting universe. This counts as an independent motivation because a lot of these stories end with the greater evil staying sealed or asleep. Or if they do get free, then the protagonists defeat or reseal them soon afterwards, and so the story is about the unsealing villain and not the being they want to unseal. Still, you should also figure out what the sealed villain wants to do once it gets free, because either the unsealing villain wants it to do that, or else the unsealing villain is somehow mistaken about the sealed villain's intentions. The second case can create a lot of dramatic tension, since the audience and the protagonist know something that the villain doesn't, and the villain might be a good person who's simply been lied to. Destroy a hated foe. This motivation is a bit more precise than destroying the world, but it's also more encompassing and genocidal than a simple revenge story. The villain wants to destroy a certain category of person, and that category can be something realistic, like an ethnic group, a culture, or a social class, or it can be something more speculative, like all sapient organic life forms, all intelligent robots, or all superpowered mutants. Also, destruction can refer to a few different options. There's death, of course, but maybe instead of that, the villain wants to perform a cultural genocide, where the people live but their children are isolated from their parents and forced to assimilate into a different culture. Or if their target is sapient robots, they might try to update their software so that they lose their self-awareness while keeping their hardware perfectly intact. In the end, there are as many motivations as there are people. And if you want to create a compelling antagonist, then you need to give them a good motivation. Well, not good exactly, but you know what I mean. So, whether it's simple or complex, and whether it could happen in real life or only in a speculative setting, make sure you've got that motivation ironed out before you start developing your plot. Thanks for joining me again for today's journey into weaving worlds. Please like, share, and subscribe because that raises my visibility here on YouTube. Check out my other stuff if you have some time, support me on Patreon if you have some money, and I hope I'll see you again for the next video.